Have you ever taken a photo and realized that no matter what aperture you use, parts of the image are still soft? Maybe the foreground is sharp, but the background is blurry, or vice versa. That's where focus stacking comes in. It's a technique that allows you to get incredible depth of field and crisp details from front to back, whether you're shooting landscapes, macro, or even product photography. In this tutorial, I'm going to break down what focus stacking is and when you'd use it, how to set it up on Canon, Sony, and Nikon cameras, and how to merge the images in post-processing for a flawless final shot. I'm Madhavan, photographer, adventurer, storyteller. For the next year, I have decided to live fully on the road, exploring this beautiful world, one breathtaking vista at a time, capturing its magic through my lens and sharing my journey with you. Join me as we explore, create, and inspire. Focus stacking is the key to achieving ultra-sharp images in situations where depth of field limitations make it impossible to get everything in focus with one shot. Or you want a super crisp foreground and background, especially for wide-angle landscapes with close foreground elements. Or macro photography, where the plane of focus is razor thin and even f/22 won't give you full sharpness. Essentially, if you want the entire scene tack-sharp, whether it's a grand vista or a tiny flower, focus stacking is your best friend. All right, let's talk about setup. First, you want a sturdy tripod. Lock down your camera on a sturdy tripod. This is crucial because we'll be combining multiple shots and any movement will make stacking that much harder. Now, set your base settings. Typically, you're going to want an aperture between f8 and f11 for the sharpest results. You might be thinking, well, why not f16 or f20? You want to avoid diffraction from smaller apertures like f16, f18, f20. So go with f8 or f11, and don't worry because we're going to be focus stacking, so we're going to get very sharp front to back pictures. Next, you want a low ISO, 100 to 200 for maximum detail and minimal noise. Third, either manual focus or set focus bracketing on your camera so you can control which parts of the scene are sharp. Most modern cameras have a built-in focus bracketing feature. If yours does, this will automate the process for you. Otherwise, you're going to have to do it manually by adjusting focus in between shots. Now for Canon users, on Canon's newer models, like the R series, like mine, the R5, or the R6, or the EOS R, focus bracketing is a built-in feature. Here's how you activate it. Red menu, that's the first menu on the left, Camera tab 5, focus bracketing, enable. Next, you're going to set the number of shots. Let's talk about the number of shots. The way focus bracketing works is you tell the camera where your nearest point of focus is, and the camera then step focuses from that point out to infinity. Once it reaches infinity focus, or the number of shots you set here, whichever comes first, the camera stops. So let's say I set number of shots at 2. The camera will focus near, then go out one step, and then stop. But maybe the scene needed 5 points of focus or more to reach infinity. So I set this at 40, and usually the camera takes anywhere from 3 to 9 shots and then stops. Next, set the focus increment. Low for macro, medium for landscapes. You can see I have it just left of center at about 4. I leave it there for pretty much all of my landscapes. Make sure you use either a 2-second timer or a remote shutter to avoid any camera shake. And then frame your subject and make sure you focus on the closest point. For Sony users, you go to the drive mode, select focus bracket, and then the same thing. You choose your step width and the number of shots. Again, frame your subject and focus on the closest point. For Nikon makes this super easy with their focus shift shooting feature. On cameras like the Z7, Z6, and the D850, You go to Menu, Photo Shooting Menu, Focus Shift Shooting. Enable it, and again, just like Canon and Sony, you set the number of shots, 5 to 15 for landscapes or more for macro, and then you set the focus step width. And again, make sure you use either a 2-second delay or a remote to prevent any camera shake. Okay, we're now back in the studio, and now it's time to take all of those images that we captured and focus stack them into a single image. So let me walk you through how to do that. Here you can see I brought all the images into Lightroom. Now some cameras are pretty slick. When you do a focus stack, the camera will insert an arrow where the focus stack begins and where the focus stack ends so that you could find the sequence when you go back and review them. Unfortunately, Canon does not. So what I do is, as you can see here, I put my hand in front of the lens to let myself know this is where the focus stack begins. So as you can see, I took a number of shots. We're just going to take a look at this one, and this one, because those are the three that I know are a focus stack that were used in the final image. So let's take a look at those. And I want to show you something very specific. So it does help when you put it into a full frame or full screen and then zoom in to take a look and see where the camera has focus and what's in sharp and what's not in sharp. Let me show you on this one. So here, this was the first in a sequence in my focus stack. And if I zoom in, it should tell me that the foreground is sharp, because remember, you always start with the nearest object and focus outward from there, right? So I told the camera the nearest object was down here in the lower left, start the focus there. So let's zoom in and see what the camera saw. So this bush or this shrub right here is not in focus, but look down here, the camera did pick up there was a shrub that was just below the frame, and you can see the tips of those are actually in focus, right? But these rocks are not in focus. This shrub is not in focus. This is the first in the sequence. Let's go to the second one. Now you see the shrub clearly is in focus. And the tips down here, which were in focus in the previous one, are not in focus because what the camera's doing is it's sequentially focusing here and now here. And then as we look up, you'll notice that the agave plant leaves are not really in focus and the background is not in focus. What happens when we go to the next frame? Now you can see that Cathedral Rock is clearly in focus, right? As are some of the tips of the agave plants in the back. Some of the agave plants are in focus here, and some of the leaves are in focus here. So there's a blend here. So those are the three that I'm going to bring into the final image. I've now selected those three images that we just looked at, and I'm going to go into Photo, Edit In, and I want to edit in Photoshop, but I want to bring these three images in as layers. So open as layers in Photoshop, and we're going to let that run. And now we can see that Photoshop has brought in all three images as distinct layers. So now the next step is we select all three of them. Just basically, I click the top one, I click the bottom one, and I shift click the bottom one to select all three. And then I come up here to edit, auto blend layers. Now it's going to ask me what kind of blend method, a panorama or stack images. I'm going to stack the images. This is not a panorama, so I want Photoshop to blend them by stacking. I want seamless tones and colors because I don't want, if the light changed even just a little bit between images, I don't want there to be any ghosting or artifacts. So I want seamless tones and colors, and I do want it to content-aware fill any transparent areas. This is where the magic of Photoshop works when you're doing a focus stack using the auto blend tool. So you click those two, check those two, and then you click OK. Photoshop goes to work. And now you notice that Photoshop is auto-masked each of the 3 layers. And what it's doing as it's auto masking is it's going through each layer and it's finding pixel by pixel in which layer does this pixel have the best resolution, the best contrast against the surrounding pixels. And it's selectively picking those pixels and masking out the pixels on the other images. So if you look at the mask, you'll notice how Photoshop works. It's masked in all of these pixels, masked out all of these pixels. And that's because in this mid-range focus, this is where the camera focused, right? And so as it goes through each of those, it'll preferentially mask in certain pixels and mask out certain pixels. And eventually it'll come out with the final merged layer. This then becomes the base layer that you then start working on. I managed to stick around for a while after filming this tutorial, and I was very fortunate to witness this very colorful sunset. And so I ended up focus stacking this one. This is a 4-image focus stack series. And if you look closely, you'll notice that it's Tack-Sharp from front to back. The foreground bush in the lower left is sharp. The foreground rocks are sharp. The agave plant leaf tips are sharp. The tree is sharp. And the background, you can see there's good detail and clarity on Cathedral Rock. So the background is also sharp. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would greatly appreciate a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribing, please consider subscribing and forward this video to a couple of your friends if you think they might find this tutorial useful. And I will see you next time. Until then, keep chasing your own magic.